I mean, consciousness couldn't just be consciousness and and total awareness without having an urge to externalize.
Some questions are hypothetical, other questions are practical. What personally attracted me to Kashmir Shaivism, it's down-to-earth pragmatism. It's down-to-earth understanding of solving this dilemma between relative and absolute. Again, in any philosophy, in any philosophical system, the attempt is always to reconcile this. Well, in terms of the academic studies, or in terms of the scholarly approach, right? We know that the history of philosophy itself is the history between the different streams of thought, something that can be exemplified in idealism and materialism. And certainly when it comes to the Western European philosophy. But we can see that in any part of the world. We can see perhaps that the philosophies that thrived in the Orient to our present time, mostly idealistic, because they accept the primacy of consciousness one way or the other. In the West it took a different turn with dialectic materialism of Aristotle. The attempts were to extrapolate on the possibility of consciousness evolving out of matter. And then these parallel streams, they run throughout the long corridor of history. The question you're asking, or rather posing here, if viewed from a more practical or pragmatic perspective, the way the Tantric teaching from the perspective of Kashmir Shaivism approaches it, it had to reconcile this experience, this what we call being in the world. This being in the world. What is this world? And there was no shortage of very profound systems prior to the arousal, right, of those systems known to us, which Kashmir Shaivism is known for. There was no shortage. There was plenty to choose from, plenty to adopt the perspective and your view. Yet Kashmir Shaivism challenges it all, challenges with this fresher perspective, fresher unifying integral perspective, that this world of phenomenal appearances, of objective phenomena, down to the sense perception, in nothing other than consciousness experiencing itself as an object of its own luminosity reflected back onto itself.
So that's like the...
In other words, and that's why many scholars who have delved into this have recognized and suggested that the teaching of Kashmir Shaivism was new in itself, wasn't new. It simply brought the revival of the authentic ancient Upanishadic teachings, which were truly integral, where this tension between relative and absolute is reconciled in a positive manner. in a life-embracing manner. So this is why I'm saying there are questions that are hypothetical and questions that are practical. It's our stand to this world. What do we do with this world? We either negate this world, and you hear me speaking about it from day one when I came to California. I keep going back to it. We cannot simply anchor or root ourselves in the teaching which does not serve the necessity of time nor the aspirations with which we come in the first place to this business of self-realization. So this was spoken with conscious delivery to expose the holes in Neo-Advaita, which simply are not suitable, neither for our day and age, nor in response to the necessity of time. It's as simple as that. So again, it's not that the absolute or consciousness cannot just abide in its own internal aspect as being, right? This in itself already a misconception or misunderstanding of the perspective which we have been just speaking about.
Of consciousness
Yes.
itself.
This being and becoming are one indispensable or two indispensable aspects of oneness. So in other words, unity and diversity are not opposing or even subordinate aspects, but mutually inclusive aspects which are essentially inseparable from the very nature of consciousness itself.
Which is eternally created.
Which exemplified by that verse, Purnamada Purnamidam, Purnat Purnam Udachyate. This relative is full. That absolute is full. The fullness comes from fullness. By fullness it is being sustained. And into fullness it returns. What remains is fullness. That is the meaning of the Purnamada Purnamidam, Purnat Purnam Udachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya. Purnat Purnam Evavashishyate. This is ancient Upanishadic verse.
Wisdom.
Yes. And that is, if you will, synonymous to the teaching of Kashmir Shaivism, where the world as we know it is not some kind of accident or appearance within awareness, but the very conscious, vibrant projection of its own brilliance as the object of contemplation, where this possibility to contemplate its own fullness is impossible unless that wave is created within awareness itself. The very concept of awareness in Kashmir Shaivism is not inert, it's vibrant. Awareness here is not something which is static and inert. It's charged, it's vibrant, it's dynamic. I said that many times, that the doctrines of Kashmir Shaivism made me understand Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's teaching in its full measure. Because Maharishi taught Vedic teaching precisely with this in view. And if any one of you who have delved in this teaching deep enough, beyond just the popular known sort of, transcendental meditation for every household, no. But the deeper dimension of teaching was precisely that. To unify all these scattered Vedas, to bring them into the light of understanding where they're all expression of that oneness. And in Maharishi's expositions on the Vedic teaching, it is analogous, one-on-one, with what is expounded through the teachings of Kashmir Shaivism. But the language is Vedic simply. The language, the terminology.
He didn't call it that, right? He didn't call it Kashmir Shaivism.
No, he was expounding it from the original Vedic perspective. Vedic perspective. But the essence of the teaching is that exemplified in that Aham Vedam, I am Veda, that I am expression of all this knowledge. The totality of the laws of nature. So this is the integral picture, the integral perspective, which Maharishi simply used that Samhita of Rishi Devata Chandas. Samhita as togetherness of observer, observing, and the object of observation. Modalities of consciousness without which there is no experience. The very expressive potentiality of Satchit Ananda. This is how consciousness expresses itself, or rather how oneness is experienced amidst diversity, and how this mutually enriching relationship between silence and dynamism. You can see this also. This is Tao De Ching. You can see it also from that perspective as well, from the Taoistic perspective, not Vedic perspective necessarily. And you can see the same approach to what oneness is a constant flux between the poles of opposites. That what Tao, incomprehensible, Tao is incomprehensible, cannot be grasped by the dichotomized nature of the mind. Because Tao, right, that can be spoken of is not the Tao.
It's really beautiful, thank you. It's the clearest I've understood it.
I concur.
So again, why at all bother to speak about this? Yes, and so many different perspectives on teaching, right? So many different, some don't utter a word, others are very, very scarce in what they say, others only speak unless asked. Yet those who are blab non-stop, right? The value of this is to take one's understanding to the core of what he had had. The rest experience will confirm. It's not at all to take someone and divert this quest into the realm of endless scholarly investigation just to make you into scholars. From the very first moment of engagement, people came to me, and I was in the company or have met those who have been studying something, some disciplines, decades, lifetimes. And the question here is, do you want to be a Christian, or you want to realize Christ consciousness? You want to be a good Buddhist, or you want to awaken? The choice is yours. Decide. It's not so much how many deities you exactly know and how many, because someone I knew, still breaking the tongue, trying to fathom all these deities in the rich pantheon of Tibetan Buddhism. Time is precious. And all this, it gives that platform of understanding, relational, practical, lived. Then you can contemplate. Then you can contemplate. I could even say that if what we have spoken about today and earlier on this week, in a state of not knowing, the so-called ignorance, we contemplating the nature of Absolute, the nature of Divine, the nature of God, the nature of... But in a state of realization, we contemplate the nature of this world. Each has its own value, and each as mysterious and magical as the other.